Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @CuendReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuendReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from The National on Monday, 5th January 2026, from the comment section. Affordability is about power, not prices. By Professor Richard Murphy. Affordability has become the dominant political issue in the United States. It is the issue that looks likely to determine elections, fracture political coalitions, and shape how people understand their own lives. The same shift is underway in Scotland and the UK, and it will become unavoidable in the next few years. But the way in which the affordability crisis is being discussed is fundamentally wrong. Most political debate still treats the problem as one of rising prices, suggesting that food costs too much, energy bills are too high, and transport is too expensive. It is implied that something has gone wrong with inflation, global supply chains, or consumer behaviour to deliver these outcomes. Fix those, it is implied, and affordability will return. That framing misses the point entirely. The affordability crisis is not about the price of bread, milk, potatoes or pasta. It is about how income has systematically extracted from households before they even get a chance to put food on their tables. People cannot afford their lives, not because everyday goods are intrinsically expensive, but because they are paying too much rent or too much in mortgage interest. They're paying monopoly rents to companies that face little or no meaningful competition. They are paying excessive interest costs embedded in almost everything they buy. This is not the inflation economists usually describe. It's all about extracting profit from people who have no way to fight back against what has been done to them by a structure permitted by policies that undermine the very societies that put politicians in power. The modern economy has been redesigned over the last few decades as a result of the political ideology put in place by Margaret Thatcher, so that now it is designed to transfer income upwards through the payment of excessive rents, interest, fees, subscriptions, and charges that are hard to see individually but are overwhelming in total. Housing costs are the most obvious example, but they are far from the only one. Telecoms, broadband, mobile phones, streaming services, software licences, insurance add-ons, banking fees, utility charges, water bills, transport systems, and online retail platforms all now operate in markets where genuine competition is weak or non-existent. Consumers are locked in, switching is costly or impossible, and prices rise not because costs have increased, but because companies can get away with it. Financialisation has deepened the problem. Modern products are routinely sold with insurance, warranties, protection plans and service contracts that are rarely needed and usually unused. Much modern equipment is robust and unlikely to fail during its expected lifespan, but fear is used to sell the financial add-ons attached to it. many of which are much more profitable for the retailer than the product itself. These practices are widespread across retail, electronics, banking, the motor industry and utilities. They're not accidental, they're designed. Supermarkets undertake these activities. So do banks. Online platforms such as Amazon do it, as do utility companies. And because these firms operate at a scale with powerful brands and weak regulation, the profits they extract are closer to monopoly rents than to rewards for innovation or efficiency. This is the real reason that affordability has collapsed, even while headline inflation has eased. The problem is not that prices rose once, it is that rent and profit extraction have never stopped. Seen in this light, the affordability crisis is a political failure. It exists because governments have chosen not to regulate power. For decades, politicians have claimed that markets are competitive, that regulators are vigilant, and that public utilities are properly overseen. In practice, regulation has been hollowed out, captured or redesigned to legitimise excess returns rather than restrain them. Financial services, banks and utilities are all supposedly regulated, yet households continue to face rising charges, declining service quality and little recourse. The result is an economy in which businesses can take a ride on consumers almost wherever they turn. And when the consequences become politically uncomfortable, politicians point elsewhere, to global forces or to consumer behaviour or to fiscal constraints, rather than their own decisions. That evasion will not wash, because we have done this differently before. An effective competition policy once existed. Price regulation was once normal. Public utilities were once placed under state control precisely because essentials should be affordable and should not be vehicles for profit extraction from captive users. And at one time, policymakers recognised that monopoly abuse was inevitable unless restrained. Electricity, water, transport and communications were treated as public services rather than profit opportunities. Returns were limited, pricing was controlled, and affordability was core objective. Today we have moved in the opposite direction. Electricity pricing systems, for example, now guarantee acceptable returns even for weak performance, often locking in excessive profits while passing risk onto consumers. Failure is rewarded, not punished. Regulation has become a mechanism for protecting investor confidence, not public well-being. But none of this is inevitable. It's the result of choices. In that case, if affordability is to be restored, the logic of economic policy must change. The first step is the need for economic honesty. Large companies are not innocent bystanders operating in fiercely competitive markets. In many sectors, they are only a handful of firms protected by scale, branding, advertising and political influence. The second step is recognising that this situation can be changed. Competition policy can be revived. Price regulation can be reintroduced. Public ownership can be expanded where markets cannot deliver fair outcomes. Step 3 is learning from history. Regulation worked when it was designed to serve people rather than markets, and when affordability was treated as a public objective rather than a side effect. The fourth step is the most difficult. Politicians must act. That requires a courageous state, one that understands government exists to serve the interests of people, not corporations, and well-being, not profit. It means regulating rents. It means keeping mortgage costs low through deliberate central bank policy rather than treating interest rates as a moral discipline. It means breaking up monopolies and imposing price controls where competition does not and cannot work. None of this is radical. All of it has precedent. What is radical is the persistent refusal to use the tools that already exist. This form of economics is not mysterious. The causes of the affordability crisis are known. Policy responses are available. What remains uncertain is political will, and that is important because in May, Scotland faces a choice. It can accept an economic model built on extraction, rent-seeking and profit gouging, essentially designed elsewhere and imposed by England-based parties without regard for social consequence. Or it can reject those parties and focus on the needs of the people of Scotland. Scotland could send a clear message that affordability matters more than shareholder returns, that exploitation is not an acceptable basis for economic life, and that the basics of living should be affordable and not rationed by income and power. Affordability must then be on the agenda. Scotland should say so plainly and demand answers that Westminster has consistently failed to provide. In other words, Scotland can make this the big issue. That article is by Professor Richard Murphy. This is from The National on Monday, 5th January 2026, from the News section. All flights cancelled at Scottish Airport amid heavy snow, by Laura Pollock. Aberdeen Airport has suspended all flights as the region is hit with heavy snow. Amber weather warnings were in place until 10 a.m. in parts of Scotland, forecasting heavy snow and travel disruption, while yellow warnings for snow and ice still cover the majority of the country. The airport issued a passenger announcement on social media, saying they will review the situation on Monday evening. Due to the deteriorating extreme weather conditions, we have taken the decision to temporarily suspend operations until 5 o'clock, when we will review the situation, a statement read. We advise any passenger due to travel to contact their airline directly and for everyone to take extra care if travelling to and from the airport. More than 100 schools have been closed amid the severe weather, while train lines are also affected. Loch Glascarnoch in the Highlands has seen 34 centimetres of snow, while Dyce in Aberdeenshire and Altnahara, Sutherland, recorded 27 centimetres, the Met Office said. Train services in northern Scotland will be disrupted until the end of the day on Tuesday, Network Rail said. Stations north of Edinburgh will not be served by LNER until 2 p.m. on Monday, and there were no ScotRail services on routes between Dundee and Aberdeen, Aberdeen-Elgin and Inverness and Kyle of Lochalsh Wick until at least midday. Police travel advice has also been issued following the weather warnings. Assistant Chief Constable Alan Waddell, the forecasted heavy snow showers and ice means driving conditions are likely to be hazardous in some areas. Our advice is to plan ahead and consider if your journey is really necessary during the weather warnings. We continue to work with partners to help our communities impacted by the adverse weather. If you need to travel, please drive to the conditions, be prepared for delays, and allow extra time for your journey. Please don't drive through road closures. The decision to close roads is not taken lightly and is done for public safety. That article was by Laura Pollock.
From The National, Tuesday the 6th of January 2026, from the news section. Scots to consider reintroduction of links to Highlands. Article written by Laura Pollock. Scots are being invited to have their say on the potential reintroduction of links to the Highlands. The wild felines could return to the Highlands as part of plans from a group of rewilding charities. A licence would be required from the government agency Nature Scot before it could go ahead. More than 40 events are planned to take place in the Highlands and Moray as part of a programme of public engagement starting on January 26th. The Links to Scotland partnership has been assessing how a potential reintroduction scheme could work since 2020. They say the region could support up to 250 links, which would pose no threat to people and prey on deer. It comes after First Minister John Swinney ruled out the legal reintroduction of links, after the illegal release of 4 in the Cairngorms last January. Steve Micklewright, Chief Executive of the charity Trees for Life, said, "Northern Scotland can support a thriving population of lynx, but social acceptance is just as important. So we are exploring in detail how people feel about bringing back this important missing native species." The charity was involved in reintroducing beavers to the Highlands in November and wants to carry out similar schemes for red squirrels and a breed of cattle called the Toros. Any reintroduction of lynx would begin with about 20 of the cats, before numbers are increased. Lynx were native to the area but driven to extinction several hundred years ago. Lisa Chilton, Chief Executive of the charity Scotland, The Big Picture, said, "Scotland has lost more of its native wildlife than almost any other country. Reintroducing lynx could help restore balance and breathe new life into Highland and Moray landscapes, but it would be essential to do this in a considered, responsible way that addresses questions and concerns." Some 89,000 households will receive mail about the proposals in January. And that article was written by Laura Pollock. From The National, Tuesday the 6th of January 2026, from the news section. Keir Starmer still not talked to Donald Trump after Venezuela attack. Article written by Laura Pollock. Keir Starmer has still not spoken to Donald Trump following US military action in Venezuela and his continued insistence that he intends to take over Greenland. Starmer is reported to be keen to establish the facts, following military action that saw Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro captured and taken to New York, with the government stopping, short of saying it was a breach of such laws. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper last night told MPs it was for the US to set out the legal basis for the move, while the Prime Minister continues to wait for a phone call with the President. At a protest on Monday evening, protesters chanted "Free Maduro" and listened to speeches from the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and Richard Burgon. The MPs told Starmer to stand up to Trump. The Prime Minister has come under pressure from MPs on Labour's left to condemn the US military action that saw Maduro captured and taken to New York. Among the international laws the US could be at risk of breaching, if it provides no justification for the attacks, is the founding charter of the United Nations. Health Secretary Wes Streeting said Starmer chooses when and what to say to the United States very carefully, to use his influence in a way that works in the UK's national interest. Streeting told Sky News, "What you've seen from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, not just in relation to the fast-moving events in Venezuela, but more generally when it comes to our relationship with the United States, and actually diplomacy and foreign policy more generally. The Prime Minister chooses what to say, how to say it, and when to say it very carefully. And what he always has at the forefront of his mind is, how does he make sure that he uses his influence and leverage in a way that first and foremost works to our national interest, whether economic interest or security interest, and then for the collective interest as well of our global security and the rules-based system, which we've seen disintegrating before our eyes. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the January 3rd military action, and that the grave action by the US could set a precedent for future relations between nations. Maduro and his wife were seized from their home on Saturday in a middle-of-the-night military operation in which the US carried out strikes on Caracas. He appeared at a court in New York on Monday, when he pleaded not guilty to narco-terrorism charges and claimed he was a prisoner of war. And that article was written by Laura Pollock.
From the National, Comments section. Tuesday, 6th January 2026. The glaring flaw in Scottish Labour's big split from Keir Starmer. This article is by Xander Elliards. New year, new me. It's the sort of slogan you see plastered on the motivational memes that clog up Facebook every January. But it also sums up the pitch to voters, which Anas Sarwar made this week. After years of cozying up to Keir Starmer, on-camera hugs, claims of regular evening phone calls, towing every line that can be drawn, the Scottish Labour MSP used the 2026 launch of his Holyrood election campaign to try and distance himself from his dear leader. Sarwar noted that Scots are angry, frustrated and impatient with the Labour government in London, and he said, "The best thing Starmer and his ministers can do is stay away from the Holyrood elections altogether." The rhetoric was quickly rewarded with all the headlines you would expect. From The Guardian's measured "Scottish Labour urges Keir Starmer to stay out of Holyrood" campaign, to the Daily Mail's less measured "Stay out of it. Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar warns unpopular Keir Starmer to steer clear of Holyrood election campaign." By Tuesday, the New Statesman's Morning Call was asking why Scottish Labour has broken with Starmer. Their conclusion was obvious: because the Prime Minister is astonishingly unpopular. According to YouGov, he has a net favourability rating of -54. To put that into context, Boris Johnson was forced to quit when he was at -53. But one huge point has been missing from the analysis of Scottish Labour's about face. Far from representing a break from UK bosses, it was without doubt conducted with Westminster approval. Remember, despite Sarwar's claims that the best thing for the UK government ministers is to stay behind their department doors in Westminster, a member of Starmer's cabinet is quite literally running his election strategy. As the Daily Record reported on September the 3rd, Douglas Alexander is co-chairing Scottish Labour's Holyrood election campaign alongside Jackie Baillie. 2 days later, on September the 5th, Ian Murray was unceremoniously booted out as Scottish Secretary and replaced by, you guessed it, Douglas Alexander. Alexander is many things: a slick operator, a smart public orator, and experienced campaign coordinator among them. Does anyone seriously believe Sarwar got his big hands-off Starmer moment without clearing it with the very people running his campaign? And once the idea of a carefully choreographed split from Westminster landed on Alexander's desk, does anyone doubt it was run past Starmer himself? Remember as well, back in 2023, Starmer told the Scottish Press Pack, "Whatever I say will be what Anas says." Are those days truly over? It seems a safe bet that Scottish Labour's "we're not like them down in London" pitch was approved, if not orchestrated, down in London. A rebellion staged with your UK boss's consent isn't a rebellion at all. It's just political theatre, and Sarwar is once again playing his part. And that article was written by Xander Elliards and read by Lynn McNeil. From the National Culture section, Tuesday the 6th of January 2026. Scottish road trip that's not the NC 500, named on Best for 2026 list. This article is by Gregor Young. A Scottish road trip has been named on a list of must-visit locations for 2026, but it's not the North Coast 500. Marking its 125th anniversary this year, the Camping and Caravanning Club has named 7 of its top locations for members to visit. For Scotland, the North East 250, a route which takes in the Cairngorms, Speyside and Moray coastline, made the list. The Camping and Caravanning Club, which has more than 600,000 members, said, "The North East 250 is one of 10 Scotland touring routes recommended by the club. The route takes in several off-grid locations and starts in Moray Speyside before taking in the country's granite coast and branching off inland to the edge of the Cairngorms and the Balmoral estate. Rare artefacts from the Titanic will be on display at the Aberdeen Titanic exhibition between March 28th and April 12th. The club encouraged members to stay at Tarland and Speyside club sites, with prices from £7.45 per night. Visit Scotland says of the North East 250 trip, expect dramatic coastlines, majestic castles, the history behind Scotland's malt whisky, and much more. There's so much to uncover in the northeast corner of Scotland. The Camping and Caravanning Club also recommends 9 other Scottish routes, although none of them were listed on the Best for 2026 list. These are the North Coast 500, the Argyll Coastal Route, the Borders Historic Route, the Deeside Tourist Route, the Highland Tourist Route, the Moray Firth Route, the South West Coastal 300, the Forth Valley Tourist Route, and the Angus Coastal Route. Elsewhere on the list for 2026, the club named Kenrin Park in County Durham, Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, Ashdown Forest in West Sussex, Hull in East Yorkshire, Tollymore Forest Country Park in County Down, and Portmeirion in North Wales. Madeline Birch, the Camping and Caravanning Club's PR and events manager, said, "From sports to literature, TV and the big screen, 2026 promises lots of must-see events, and the campsite is an ideal base to discover them. If you don't fancy one of our top picks, why not do a stadium tour and get inspired for a summer of football, or pay a trip to the lakes and get involved with the Beatrix Potter 160 celebrations. There are plenty of new experiences waiting to be explored, and a visit to some of these locations will ensure you make the most of the incredible outdoors this year." And that article was written by Gregor Young and read by Lynn McNeil. From the National Culture section, Tuesday the 6th of January 2026. Popular French restaurant in Edinburgh closes after 28 years. This article is by James Walker. A popular French restaurant in Edinburgh is set to close its doors after 28 years in business. Maison Bleue, which is known for its mix of French, Scottish and North African cuisine in the city's Old Town, will be closing due to the retirement of its founder, Dean Gassabi. Gassabi founded Maison Bleue in 1998, with a statement shared with the Edinburgh Minute stating that soaring operational costs and the hospitality industry's financial pressures also featured in the decision. We are overwhelmed with gratitude for the loyalty the people of Edinburgh have shown us, particularly through challenging times like Brexit and the pandemic, said Gassabi. This restaurant has been our blood, sweat and tears for nearly 3 decades, and we've been honoured to mark countless special moments with our patrons, from first dates and engagements to family weddings. That commitment from our customers is a treasure that will never be lost on us. Gasabi also stressed his pride at having worked with social enterprise Social Bite to welcome homeless people at their non-profit social enterprise restaurant Maison Bleue at Home, which Leonardo DiCaprio visited in 2016. And that article was written by James Walker and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of January. Anas Sarwar brands his own MPs as idiotic amid a briefing war. An article written by James Walker. Anas Sarwar has branded those who are engaging in briefing and counter-briefing amid a briefing war between his own MPs and Keir Starmer allies as idiotic. It comes after reports earlier this week that Scottish Labour MPs are hoping to replace the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, with Wes Streeting before May's Holyrood election. Several denied this to the National yesterday, but Mr Starmer's aides have still commented on the reports and branded the Scottish representatives responsible as hypocrites and idiots. One told the Times newspaper, "These idiots need to stop being part of the problem and start talking up a government that's ended austerity in Scotland and delivered so much north of the border. Not least the select few on the payroll who brief against him one day in London whilst queuing up in Glasgow the next to get a selfie after his keynote speech." Another added, "They're hypocrites, they're idiots if they think that they would have won their seats without Sir Keir." Asked by Bauer Media about these comments and whether these MPs are idiots at a campaign visit at Glasgow City College's Riverside campus, Mr Sarwar responded, "I've always had the view that anyone who thinks the answer to any issue is to do briefings or counter-briefings or talk negatively about their colleagues, I think that is idiotic." The Scottish Labour leader added, "I think anyone that engages in that behaviour, regardless of which political party they're in, regardless of which part of the country they're in, is idiotic." He went on, "The best thing that our ministers can do is behind their doors, at their desks, improving outcomes for people across the country. And the best thing that Scottish Labour MPs can do is to be on the front line with their candidates, making the arguments about the choices in Scotland and helping us to get rid of the SNP and elect a new government. And I know that's what every single one of them are committed to." SNP MP Kirsty Blackman, meanwhile, said, "It's staggering to see Anas Sarwar openly admit that Scottish Labour MPs are idiots amid the increasingly bitter civil war in the Labour Party. One minute he's Sir Keir Starmer's loyal stooge, rolling over and obeying his every command, and the next minute he's frantically trying to distance himself. He's a total chancer, and it won't wash with voters who think that it looks fake, weak and desperate. While Labour MPs fight like rats in a sack, families are paying the price for Labour Party failure as the cost of living soars under Keir Starmer. Energy bills are £500 higher than promised. Food prices have gone through the roof. UK unemployment is at a 5-year high. The economy has been downgraded. Public finances have deteriorated and families are struggling to get by. In contrast, under John Swinney, the SNP government is delivering the best cost of living support in the UK. In May, voters can sack Keir Starmer, prioritise the cost of living and secure a fresh start with independence by voting SNP at the Scottish elections. An article written by James Walker. The National News on Wednesday the 7th of January. Hundreds of Scottish schools are shut for a third snow day. An article written by Laura Pollock. Hundreds of schools in northern Scotland will remain closed for a third day as much of the country braces itself for further snow and icy conditions. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for ice and snow across the northern half of the country on Wednesday, which comes into force at midnight and remains in place until 11:59 p.m. Forecasters have warned a further 5 to 10 centimetres of snow is likely to fall across ground above 100 metres, while areas above 200 metres could see up to 20 centimetres. There's also a yellow warning of ice for southern and western parts of the country from midnight until 10 a.m. Heavy snow in the first part of the week led to hundreds of schools being closed across northern Scotland on Tuesday, and while many are set to reopen on Wednesday, disruption continues in many areas. This includes Aberdeenshire, where all schools and council-run nurseries will remain closed, along with dozens of schools in Moray and in Aberdeen, and a number of those in Orkney and in Shetland. Pupils in the Highlands were due to return from the festive break on Wednesday, but many will have an extra day off, with more than 120 schools closed due to the weather conditions. Aberdeenshire Council declared a major incident on Tuesday, warning of a good chance of some rural communities being cut off, as well as the possibility of power cuts. The snowy conditions on Tuesday disrupted road, air and rail travel across the country, with some railway lines closed after snow up to 1.2 metres deep drifted onto the tracks in places. Network Rail said that train services in northern Scotland will be disrupted until the end of the day on Tuesday, with Network Rail Scotland saying work is ongoing overnight in an effort to keep tracks clear. The lowest overnight temperature in Scotland on Tuesday was in Dulwini and Tullach Bridge, where temperatures dropped as low as minus 11.2 degrees Celsius and minus 10.7 degrees Celsius. In Glasgow, services on the city's subway network were suspended on Tuesday after ice on the third rail caused a power failure. Operator SPT said that services on the Outer Circle line had resumed by lunchtime. Wednesday's yellow weather warning for snow and ice covers an area stretching north from Dundee in the east and the Isle of Skye in the west. Describing likely conditions in the affected area, the Met Office said, an area of snow is likely to persist across northern Scotland during Wednesday, spreading down the east coast throughout the day. This will be falling as rain or sleet at low elevations, especially around coasts, but is likely to fall onto frozen surfaces, bringing the potential for widespread icy conditions to continue. Police Scotland said that the impact of the snow is likely to be felt over the next few days in the north and northeast of Scotland, urging people to follow travel advice. Assistant Chief Constable Alan Waddell said, local resilience partnerships are continuing to meet to coordinate and deliver the response to disruption experienced by communities in the north and northeast of Scotland following heavy snowfall over the weekend. We've been working closely with resilience partners across local authorities, other emergency service partners, transport partners, NHS and health and social care partnerships, and other local organisations to support communities affected by adverse weather and to keep public services open where possible. Some services may be impacted by adverse weather, and I would encourage the public to check on neighbours or relatives if they're able to do so safely. Ministers met police, local authorities, utilities companies and other bodies on Tuesday to discuss the response to the severe weather. Justice Secretary Angela Constance, who chaired the meeting, said that difficult conditions are expected to remain this week and that ministers will continue to closely monitor the situation and to engage with local partners in severely affected areas. Posting on social media, John Swinney said, please be aware of an amber warning for snow affecting much of the north of Scotland today and the yellow warning of snow and ice across most of Scotland. I'm very grateful to all public bodies and volunteers for the support that is being provided. Please stay safe. The First Minister had earlier paid tribute to the truly exceptional efforts of farmers, volunteers and members of the public in helping clear roads, dig out cars and keeping people safe, which he said showed heartening community spirit. An article written by Laura Pollock. The National, on Wednesday the 7th of January. Opinion. The battle over who really profits from Scotland's energy. A column written by Xander Elliots. Scotland's renewable energy boom is often presented as a win-win: clean energy, local jobs and community benefit. But in many areas, residents say that the reality looks very different. While private companies extract millions in guaranteed profits, communities receive relatively small payments, prompting growing calls for a shift towards public and community ownership of the country's renewable resources. Here we look at how energy giants and local communities are engaging with each other in areas across Scotland, from Lewis to Skye, Beauly to East Lothian, and the lessons that can be learned for the future. While ideas vary on how best to make sure that Scotland's communities benefit from the renewable energy boom happening all around them, there is little debate about the system currently in place. Andrew Robinson, the coordinator of the Skye Wind Farm Information Group, said that the Ben Achatil wind farm in his area was a classic case. The amount of benefit that they offer at the moment is derisory compared to the amount of profits that they make, he said. They've been paying less than £2,000 per megawatt per year, so £700,000 in community benefits over 16 years. But the ultimate owners are a private equity company in the Cayman Islands, and they've taken £51 million in profits. Lindsay Ward from Communities Before Power Companies argued that focusing on benefits of any size shifts attention away from the negative impacts of energy developments. The Beauly-based activist said, "It's not just about the lack of benefits, and when you say benefits, it's beads for the natives. It's also that there are negative impacts to communities." She also raised concerns about huge multinationals extracting profits. They've got shareholders like BlackRock and Vanguard. This is massive business, Ms Ward said of SSE, the firm behind plans for a power line through her area. They're going to stand to make a huge, eye-watering profit doing this, paid for by the UK consumer. The little person in the street who says, "Hey, you're going to trash ancient woodlands, you're going to ruin lives." They're exhausted and they're just wrung out. Mr Robinson drew parallels to the oil boom of the 1980s. What we're seeing is a rush from overseas investment companies to fund wind farms in Scotland because the guaranteed price is really high for electricity, so they make a lot of money, he said. "I don't understand why the Scottish Government is allowing the profits from its resources to go overseas, in the same way that oil money was." The parallel was also drawn by the SNP at the launch of its Scotland's Energy campaign earlier in December, where the party noted that Westminster had handed control of our oil to private companies and funnelled the profits south, whereas Norway put its profits in public hands to help pay for schools, healthcare, jobs and pensions. As it stands, Scottish Government guidance is that companies should pay £5,000 per year to a community fund for every megawatt of power generated. In practice, in Skye, the owners of the two currently operational wind farms, Ben Achatil and Edinbane's Vattenfall, each pay around £50,000 to £60,000 annually to a local community council. Mr Robinson said that those amounts are not enough money to do anything significant. What can you do with £50,000 as a community? For Ms Ward, the cost-benefit balance simply does not stack up. Perhaps we'll get a new shinty club, but for the rest of our lives we're going to have to struggle on the roads with SSE traffic, she said. Maybe they'll give us £250 off our energy bills a year, but you've lost, say, 20% of the value of your property. This isn't for you, this isn't for communities, it's not for Scotland, it's purely for the profit of the multinationals and the global investment companies. It's obscene, to be honest. But Chris Bruce, the chair of East Lammermuir Community Council, said that the benefits that the community are being offered have increased very significantly since renewables first came to his area back in 2003, especially after the Scottish Government's £5,000 per megawatt policy was brought in 2014. There are currently 6 wind farms in the area operated by 2 firms, Mr Bruce explained. One, Fred Olsen's Renewables, now pays the Community Council £138,000 per year to use as they see fit. The other, CWP Energy, has agreed to use both past and future payments to fund a new community hall in Oldham Stocks, which is expected to cost between £700,000 and £800,000. We started with an example of a church that needs a new carpet. Can we afford to buy it? Mr Bruce said. Now, if the church needed to be rebuilt, we could do it. We've gone from the carpet to the building. He added, that's not the same as saying it's the right amount, but we certainly got a lot more than we did before. Mr Bruce also pointed to a deal struck with the developers of Eastern Green Link 1, a 2 gigawatt electrical connection to be built between Torness and County Durham. Communities at either end of the line have been offered around £4 million to invest in their areas. He said that there were plans in place to use the high-value short-term investment for projects, including insulation upgrades for locals' homes, improving public transport links and creating a path network for active travel. Such a model could help to assuage community concerns in areas such as Bewley, where the transmission plans have huge local opposition. But in Skye, Mr Robertson said it's not about the value of the community payments. It's not like they could just pay us a few £1,000s per megawatt more and that would make it worthwhile. It needs a complete restructuring of the way it's owned. Across the water in Lewis there is an example wind farm which Mr Robertson said shows what could be done elsewhere. There, the Point and Sandwick Trust's Ben Griddig wind farm is reaping rewards for the community on a different scale to those owned by multinational corporations. The 9-megawatt, 3-turbine farm cost £14 million to build, covered by roughly £4 million of grants and public loans and a £10 million loan from Santander. Now the farm produces around £900,000 per year for the local community. Once the loans are repaid, this will be more like £2 million. Mr Robertson said that consultants Aquaterra had crunched the numbers and that model pays 34 times more money back into the local community than the £5,000 per megawatt per year rate. He believes that private finance could make it a reality elsewhere. We've been told by a major lending bank that they want to fund community-owned projects, he said. There is money there to back those schemes because the banks know that wind energy is profitable. He said that what is needed is for the government to introduce a small grant or loan scheme to allow communities to hire people to work on such projects full-time. They'd easily repay it out of the profits they make afterwards, he said. A key pillar of the SNP's energy proposals is community ownership of infrastructure, with locals to be offered the chance to own up to 20% of onshore wind projects post-independence. The proposed model would see 8% of the project automatically given to residents, the community and the council, while the other 12% is made available for purchase by local residents. Mr Robinson questioned why the 12% should be allocated in that way, saying that while wealthy individuals within the community who've got money to invest might get a better rate of return, that isn't really community payback. For Ms Ward, the proposal comes late in the day. We do support localised energy, but how are you going to get it off them? She asked. How are we going to pull that into ownership when the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard are making such a killing? That's why I think we've missed the boat. It's sailed already. You've got to build more, and this is the issue. We don't want you to build any more. In East Lammermuir, a model is being developed that might show how the SNP's proposals could work in practice, even before independence. There, the company Belltown Power is looking for permission to develop a Newlands Hill wind energy hub, and they've pledged to donate 1% of the ownership to local communities, with the option to buy up to 4% more. For the question of how to afford that 4%, Mr Bruce, like Mr Robertson in Skye, pointed to traditional lenders. You can go to a bank and say, "We own 1% of the site, that's our collateral, what will you lend us?" We're not a penniless organisation. We've got, say, £300,000 coming in, guaranteed and absolutely clear. For most banks, that's a fabulous degree of confidence that the organisation's got an income. Compared to almost anything else, that's really strong collateral. However, Mr Bruce said that owning 1/20th of a wind farm may be too much for just East Lammermuir Community Council to administer. So they called in East Lothian's other 19 community councils, formed a single entity to work together and spread the benefits more widely. There's a level of ambition across the whole council which significantly exceeds what we've done to date, he said. Mr Bruce finally offered advice to other Scots communities looking to gain benefits from development in their area. You almost need two heads, the one that raises the concerns about the proposal itself, and the other one at the same time is saying, if it did happen, what benefits might we want to see? For quite understandable reasons, most people can't get their head around saying, I don't want this development to happen, but if it does, I want to see these benefits. A column written by Xander Elliots.
This is an article taken from the news and politics pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 7th of January. It's written by Donald Erskine. There will be no STV bulletins covering Scottish news today, as staff are walking out in protest over redundancies. Staff at STV are walking out in response to proposed changes to the broadcaster's news output, which include replacing the North of Scotland edition of STV News at 6 with a single programme based in Glasgow. Footage released from the protests shows protesters holding signs saying, "Support local news," and chanting, "Stop the cuts." There have been 14 voluntary redundancies across the news teams in Scotland, plus 3 compulsory redundancies planned at the Glasgow office. A worker on the picket line spoke to the Glasgow Times newspaper. They said, "It's just been a catastrophic failure of communication and management, the lack of dignity and respect that has been shown to people who have been at the coalface, who've gone to work every single day to make this the most watched news programme in the country, is astonishing." The figures circulated on the first day back of STV News this year showed a massive audience for the news. And to be told constantly that we're a cost, to feel like we're underappreciated, we're undervalued, is appalling. We're now in a situation where people are choosing to leave STV News. When asked what people will miss when they turn on their televisions to find there's no Scottish news bulletins today, the worker said, "Local news never mattered more. We live in an age of disinformation, and it's really, really important that there is a news service that people trust and can rely on to tell them the truth about what's going on in their local area. And the news isn't just about the hard and the big stuff. The news is about celebrating local people's achievements. It's about highlighting the plight of a local sports club. It's about telling an audience about some amazing volunteering work that's been done. It's about raising awareness of a whole range of issues, and if that goes, that's a real shame." Under the new plans, just 30% of the content would be dedicated to the North, and up to 60 jobs are at risk as a result of the proposals. A total of 94% of National Union of Journalists members who voted supported strike action, with 98% backing action short of a strike. Picket lines are due to be set up outside STV's Glasgow offices from 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. and at its Aberdeen offices from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Nick McGowan Lowe, the NUJ national organiser for Scotland, said, "Our members are angry at the lack of leadership from the top of the company, angry at management's handling of the proposed changes, and angry that their colleagues are facing compulsory redundancies because of the company's financial mismanagement. It is not too late for management to rethink their plans and avoid damaging strikes." The NUJ has criticised the broadcaster's changes, calling them bad for viewers and bad for journalism in northern Scotland. STV bosses had originally planned to replace both the Central Belt and Northern editions of the programme with a single bulletin from Glasgow, but these were watered down by STV bosses. An STV spokesperson said, "The NUJ's action is ill-timed as consultation with unions and colleagues is ongoing, and significant progress has been made in reducing the impact on jobs. As a result of our cost savings plan, 28 roles are impacted across our newsrooms, the majority of which have been achieved through voluntary redundancy or redeployment. Our request to Ofcom for changes to the news commitments in our licences, which they propose to accept, ensures the delivery of news gathering and coverage right across Scotland on a sustainable basis for the company, and sees the expansion of our digital news service in response to changing news consumption. STV is a commercial business with public service commitments, which we are incredibly proud of, but for which we receive no public funding. And our proposals will protect our valued news service in the face of a dramatically changing media landscape. The broadcaster said that the cuts are part of a wider cost-saving strategy and that most of the affected jobs have been addressed through voluntary redundancy or redeployment. STV has also applied to Ofcom to amend its news delivery. That article was written by Donald Erskine.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of January. Russell Findley's top advisor quits 4 months before the Holyrood election. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. Russell Findley's top advisor has quit just 4 months before the Holyrood election. The Herald newspaper reports that David Bateman has resigned to pursue new opportunities and that it was the right time for him to move on. Mr. Bateman, who was previously head of media for the party, has been a senior advisor to the Scottish Tories since September of 2024. It comes after a raft of Scottish Tory politicians, including councillors, an MSP and a member of the House of Lords, have jumped ship and defected to Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Reform has been repeatedly predicted to cut into the Scottish Tory vote at the election in May. Mr. Bateman said in a statement, "I have decided that it's the right time for me to move on. I look forward to taking on new challenges and pursuing new opportunities. I wish Russell and the party well." Magnus Gardam, who has previously served as Special Advisor to Tory Scottish Secretaries Alistair Jack and David Mundell, is set to replace Mr. Bateman in the role. Mr. Gardam was previously the former political editor of the Herald and the Daily Record. He said, "I'm excited to be joining Russell and the Scottish Conservatives ahead of what is a crucial election in May. I look forward to getting down to work." Mr. Findley added, "I'm delighted to welcome Magnus to my team. He's a highly experienced and respected figure who will play a key role in the run-up to the election. I'd also like to thank David for his service and wish him all the best for the future." It comes after Mr. Findley launched his party's Holyrood 2026 election campaign by stating that Scotland's unofficial national anthem, The Flower of Scotland, is maximum Scottish cringe and should be replaced. Mr. Findley also said recently that it had never been more important to be a unionist. "In terms of the unionist part, we are the only wholly convincing party of the union," he claimed. Taking Reform UK, they purport to be a pro-union party, but I don't think Nigel Farage could care less about the union. Nigel Farage cares about Nigel Farage. He fielded pro-independence candidates in the general election. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. The National Politics on Wednesday the 7th of January. Ranking the 6 silliest Westminster traditions. An article written by Hamish Morrison. Westminster is known for many things. It's the seat of power in the United Kingdom. It's a potent symbol of the height and might of the British Empire. It remains the backdrop for the great political battles of our day. It's also a profoundly silly place, filled with eccentrics and oddballs, and gripped by strange, antiquated traditions. The Palace of Westminster is the workplace of probably thousands of people and is famously equipped with a number of bars, restaurants, a hairdresser and reportedly even a shooting range. It's one of the few places on earth that you will still see drunken members of the nobility sucking on cigars and sipping champagne at lunchtime. So these are just a few of Westminster's silliest traditions in ascending order. At number 6, wearing of suit jackets in the press gallery. To gain the privilege to stalk the corridors of power, you have to pass through quite a strict vetting procedure, which stops just short of asking for the blood type and star sign of everyone you've met in the last decade. After that bureaucratic cavity search, you might think that you're in the clear. You would be wrong. There are still a baffling array of rules about where you're allowed to go and what you should wear in the Palace of Westminster. For instance, to gain access to the press gallery of the Commons, men need to be wearing a suit jacket. This is an especially stupid rule because, as far as I'm aware, you can be wearing a pyjama top or a football shirt underneath, but you must wear a suit jacket. Number 5. Wearing a tie in Westminster Hall. As if the press gallery dress code wasn't strict enough, you must be not only suited and booted, but also strangled by a necktie in order to sit on a Westminster Hall debate. I've been at the receiving end of quite a strict telling off for being in breach of this statute only once, and it's not a mistake that I would make again in a hurry. Just pity my poor colleague, who not only found himself sanctioned for this offence, but for the additional sin of bringing in a Tupperware box to the hallowed floor of Westminster Hall. Obviously, the rules of the game are even harsher for male MPs, who must be wearing ties, even at the height of summer, when in the Commons or in Westminster Hall. Women are exempt from this rule, and the one above. At number 4, the constant bells. Bells are a constant of life in Westminster. Big Ben is rung every 15 minutes to draw your attention regularly to the inexorable march of time. At seemingly random intervals, what I can only imagine are a troop of mad monks ring out the bells of some forgotten chapel with the gay abandon and musical ability of a monkey playing the electric guitar. The division bells are the most bothersome of them all. They are rung with a military ferocity, presumably to rouse brandy-soaked members dozing off in the parliamentary bars. They are insistent and noisy, and most bizarrely connected to a system which covers a small area of the Westminster Village. Nearby pubs, such as the Westminster Arms and the Red Lion, are connected in this boozy ecosystem, and I've seen members pulled away from their first taste of a pint by the ding-ding-ding of the division bell. It's like school, with more drinking. Number 3. The mace. Once a fearsome medieval weapon, the mace is now reduced to a purely ceremonial function. This function appears principally to be used as a prop by the more theatrical members in a fit of pique. The last MP to steal the mace in protest was former Inverness MP Drew Hendry. Before him was former Brighton MP Lloyd Russell Moyle. The only sitting MP to have ever dared is former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, all the way back in 2009, over plans to expand Heathrow Airport. The mace forms a key part of the ludicrous display which is the state opening of Parliament. That includes a host of ridiculous traditions, such as the pantomime of the Commons being summoned to the Lords to hear the King's speech. They close the door on the King's messenger in a symbolic act of defiance, before gladly scurrying along to bask in His Majesty's glory in the gaudy surround of the upper house. It's nauseating. Number 2. No names. MPs are banned from referring to each other by name in the Commons, which leads to all sorts of cloying constructions, including my honourable friend and the obsequious the honourable and learned member, which is only to be used in reference to those members who are barristers. Fortunately, this latter epithet is usually only found in the pages of Hansard, the official parliamentary record. And while we're on the topic, during the reign of Boris Johnson, there were a number of hard-to-believe episodes where MPs were criticised harshly for accusing the then Prime Minister of lying, only to later hear a report from the Privileges Committee, which laid bare the extent of his dishonesty over the Partygate scandal. And finally, at number 1, House of Lords etiquette, my personal favourite. Unlike in the Commons, there isn't really anyone chairing proceedings in the Lords. There is the Lord Speaker, but they do not have nearly as much power as their equivalent in the lower chamber. This is best illustrated when more than one person rises to speak. The Lord Speaker does not rule on who gets to speak and when, so the competing peers must engage in a game of verbal chicken to see who will relent first and give way so that one person can lecture the House. An article written by Hamish Morrison. The National News on Wednesday the 7th of January. A top travel guide makes a major error in Scottish Highlands description. An article written by The Joker. It's that time of year again. January is upon us, and with it comes the annual migration of bright-eyed travel writers, striding to the fore to extol on the places you simply must visit in 2026. You'll have seen the headlines. Forbes offered the 10 best cities in the world to visit in 2026. CNN hedged its bets with where you should and shouldn't travel in 2026. The BBC went with the 20 best places to travel to in 2026, which in turn inspired Time Out to run the ever so slightly circular The 20 Best Places to Travel in 2026, according to the BBC. Amid these myriad monotonous offerings, one in particular caught the joker's eye. The spectacular British wilderness that is one of the world's best places to visit in 2026, according to Rough Guides, proclaimed Time Out's travel section. What British wilderness could that be, we hear you ask? Why, none other than the entire Scottish Highlands. Somewhere along the line, it seems, the traditional definition of a wilderness, a landscape untouched by humans, has been quietly set aside, replaced by a romanticised fog of tartan, peat and vibes. Time Out's piece manages the impressive feat of describing the Highlands as a place where you can drive for miles and barely see another car, while also warning that readers should be wary on the roads thanks to over-tourism. To be fair, Time Out was merely reporting what Rough Guides had to say. Over there, the Scottish Highlands were ranked 22nd out of 26 places to visit in 2026, with readers dubiously informed that the region is Europe's last wilderness. It isn't. Ranach Moor, also in the Highlands, is often cited as Britain's last true wilderness, even though that is debatable, but it certainly doesn't extend to the rest of a vast region. And in any case, Ranach Moor didn't merit so much as a mention in either Rough Guides or Time Out. What did get a mention was joining a ceilidh in Ullapool or cycling between Isla's distilleries, two activities which would be somewhat difficult to pull off in an actual wilderness. Rough Guide's top tip was equally eyebrow-raising, advising anyone planning to drive the North Coast 500 to bring a paper map. The Joker would like to reassure any concerned reader that the North Coast 500 is not, in fact, the 18th century. And the Highlands are, of course, not a British wilderness. An article written by The Joker. The National World News on Wednesday the 7th of January. There were no fire safety checks at a Swiss bar for 5 years. An article issued by the National News Desk. Fire safety inspections had not been carried out for several years at the bar where a deadly blaze broke out during a New Year's Eve party, Swiss authorities said yesterday. The head of Crans-Montana's municipal government, Nicolas Farreau, said that there had been inspections of Le Constellation up until 2019. But he told a news conference that the local council discovered, after consulting documents after the fire, that periodic checks were not carried out between 2020 and 2025. We regret this bitterly, he said, adding that it will be up to judicial authorities to determine what influence that may have had on the chain of events that led to the fire. Monsieur Farreau said that he could not immediately explain why safety inspections had not been conducted for such a long time. He said that in September last year, an external expert had been asked to carry out a soundproofing analysis and had concluded that the bar complied with anti-noise rules, without making further remarks. Investigators believe that sparkling candles on champagne bottles ignited the fire at Le Constellation in the resort of Crans-Montana when they came too close to the ceiling. 40 people were killed and another 116 injured. Investigations include looking into whether soundproofing material on the ceiling conformed with regulations. Monsieur Farreau said that the foam used in Le Constellation had been considered acceptable at the time of the last inspection. Sparklers, known as Bengal fountains, have now been banned inside the resort's venues, he added. Authorities have opened a criminal investigation into the bar's managers. The two are suspected of involuntary homicide, involuntary bodily harm, and involuntarily causing a fire, according to the Valley Region's chief prosecutor. An article issued by the National News Desk.
This is from The National on Thursday, 8th January 2026. From the comment section. Scotland should take note of Trump's threat to Greenland. By David Pratt. At first, the reaction was a combination of derision and puzzlement, but that was last year. Fast forward some 10 months or so, and that near dismissive amusement has been replaced with a palpable sense of panic in some European quarters. I'm speaking, of course, about US President Donald Trump's fixation on having Greenland as part of his Greater America overseas adventure. At first, it might have all been a laugh, dismissed by many as another madcap Trump notion, but emboldened by seizing the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro and increasingly brazen in the use of America's formidable war machine, no one is laughing much anymore when Trump declares we need Greenland. Trump's claim that it's all in the interests of US national security is, quite frankly, to use one of his own favourite phrases, fake news. Yes, Greenland's location is of great strategic value, but he's kidding no one when he says this is America's prime motive. For just like Venezuela, Greenland too is about making a very big buck, given the tiny Arctic nation also has plenty of pickings on the natural resources front. Caracas has some 300 billion barrels of crude oil in reserve, but Greenland likewise has the black stuff on its doorstep, along with significant deposits of valuable rare earth elements, minerals, precious metals, and other goodies that doubtless have dollar signs flashing before Trump's eyes. You know for certain that America's money men are circling like sharks when the Financial Times reports that Trump's friends have been eyeing it for some time. Friends, for example, like Peter Thiel, venture capitalist, political activist and co-founder of Palantir Technologies, who wants to set up crypto-empowered network states on undeveloped territory. By all accounts, Thiel has already invested in Praxis, a start-up that aims to do just that and which has reconnoitred Greenland. As the FT also highlighted, Trump's ambassador to Denmark, Ken Howry, was a co-founder with Thiel and Elon Musk of PayPal, and Greenland was high on all their lists as a potential cash cow. Wanting Greenland is one thing, but getting it is another, especially when the autonomous territory falls under Denmark's control. But here Trump has a couple of options. The first, albeit most unlikely, would be a military takeover. This no doubt would go down well with some within the MAGA cadres who, despite their reluctance to see US engagement overseas, would enjoy the way such an intervention would probably put paid to NATO in a heartbeat. The second US option would be to use the Ukraine card, whereby basically Washington does a quid pro quo security deal that gives Europe assurances from America on Ukraine in exchange for an expanded role for the US in Greenland. That said, this option is fraught with diplomatic obstacles and perils. Yet another option for Washington, and this is where Scotland might want to sit up and take particular notice, would be for the Americans to manoeuvre Greenland's independence movement in its favour. To that end, it's known that the US has already carried out covert operations in Greenland, with the CIA and the US National Security Agency reportedly stepping up surveillance of Greenland's independence movement and tasked with identifying locals sympathetic to and critical towards America. And speaking of Scotland, there are lots of other reasons why we should be giving Greenland our full attention over and above the obvious concern that this is yet another example of Trump's appetite for unilateral military action and attempting to ride roughshod over the international rules-based order. Geography is the obvious place to start, given that Scotland, being the world's most northerly non-Arctic nation, is one of the 10 closest countries geographically to Greenland. Launched in 2019, the Scottish Government's Arctic Connections Policy Framework also makes clear the significant environmental, economic and social characteristics Scotland shares with Arctic and subarctic regions. From climate change impacts and presence of remote and island communities, as well as our strong reliance on marine resources and renewable energy, we have lots in common. Within that framework lies the Arctic Connections Fund, a small grants programme that also, interestingly enough, involves direct collaboration with partners in Greenland. Currently, the framework is under review, with the final report due to be published next month. In an article written for the US-based think tank, the Arctic Institute, back in 2024, one regional expert described how Scotland is carving out its Arctic identity. How interesting then it will be to see how such policies develop in the future should Trump's Greenland ambitions, God forbid, come to fruition. At the very least, it's a sharp reminder, as many in Scotland have long recognised, that our nation sits in a key strategic position connecting the European Arctic with Central Europe and North America. In a rapidly shifting and volatile global geopolitical landscape, this recognition is more vital than ever. Were we in need of yet further reminding, then yesterday's news that US military planes flew along the Scottish coast and US Special Forces used Wick as a jumping-off point as part of a military operation to seize a Russian-flagged oil tanker linked to Venezuelan oil is exactly such a point in case. The fact is, even if Scotland were an independent, sovereign nation tomorrow, we would still find ourselves inextricably connected to the fluid, diplomatic and ever powerless geopolitical landscape around us. With that in mind, it makes it all the more imperative that Scotland focuses with ever more rigour on preparing and equipping itself with the political infrastructure capable of providing a cohesive foreign policy outlook. Yes, foreign policy is a reserved matter for the UK Parliament and Government, for now, but how remiss of us would it be not to have done the preparatory work for any welcome change in the future? Those who doubt the necessity of this need only look at events unfolding both far-flung and much closer to home to realise the urgency. For those who haven't already, it's time to wake up to the reality here in Europe of what America has become. Trump never has been, and most certainly now is, no simple figure of ridicule. Instead, as both Venezuela and Greenland show, he is a dangerous and loose cannon on the world stage. That article was by David Pratt. This is from The National on Thursday, 8th January 2026, from the Sport section. From racing men to signing for the world's top female road racing team. An exclusive by Susan Egglestaff. Less than 2 years ago, Lauren Dixon didn't even know how to enter a bike race. Indeed, so naive was she in the early days of her cycling career that her first race saw her enter the open category, and so she was one of only 2 females in a field primarily composed of men. Fast forward just 20 months, and Dixon is on the verge of making her debut as a professional cyclist with the world's top women's road racing team. It's an astonishing rise by the 25-year-old from Edinburgh, and one that even she admits is hard to get her head round at times. Being in this position, it's not something I actually believed might happen. Dixon says, having signed a 2-year contract with the French team FDJ Suez, which boasts the world's best female road rider, Demi Vollering, on its roster. Meeting the team for the first time, I was like, wow, this is real. I had looked at FJR riders at races and thought it would be so amazing to be part of that team, so it's still sinking in that this is actually happening to me. Being on the international stage as an athlete is not new for Dixon. Growing up, she represented GB in both trail running and duathlon, but hadn't tried her hand at bike racing until April 2024, when she decided to enter a regional event in the west of Scotland. Her ignorance of cycling races was why she ended up on the start line alongside dozens of men, but an above-par performance saw her immediately catch the eye of more than a few of her fellow riders. At this point, though, Dixon still had little idea that she'd ever be in the sport for anything more than mere enjoyment. I've done sport since I was really young, but what's funny about coming to a sport fresh is even with the really basic things in cycling, I just had no clue. It was like a different world to me, she recalls. In that first race, I was so naive about everything, and although I really enjoyed it, I had no idea it would turn into something. It was only when I was racing against men and they were saying that it was pretty uncommon for a woman to keep up that I started to realise that maybe I was quite good. Dixon was quickly snapped up by the Scottish development team Alba Road team, and her impressive performances in her first few races at the tail end of the 2024 season increased the levels of optimism in her potential yet further. 2025, which was Dixon's first full season as a bike rider, would go better than anyone could have hoped. Top 10 general classification finishes in the Tour de Feminin and Tour of Norway, as well as a top 20 placing in the Women's Tour of Britain, was confirmation that the Edinburgh rider had what it takes to be truly world class, with her strong start enough to attract the attention of FDJ Suez. Her rapid rise through the ranks and into the sport's top women's world tour team is not, though, perhaps quite as surprising as may initially appear. Having been in a relationship with Tour de France rider Sean Flynn since their school days, Dixon became a regular training partner of her boyfriend. And so slowly but surely, and without ever realising, she developed remarkable fitness levels which served her extremely well as soon as she began racing. And having someone to speak to about the world of professional cycling has, she admits, been extremely welcome over the past 18 months, as well as when she looks at what lies ahead. I've cycled a lot with Sean, so I've picked up a lot of things from him subconsciously, she says. Over the years, I've built up a base of fitness, but had never put it to use, so it's not that I suddenly got really fit, it's just that I've never used it in a race. Sean has been so supportive, but at the start of my cycling career, he didn't want to push me because he didn't want me to feel like I had to race just because he loves racing. But then he saw that I was loving it too. Sean gives me a lot of advice, but hopefully as I progress in my career, I'll need it less. It's so helpful having someone who knows so much about cycling. And sport is never a straight line. You have downs as well as ups, and so having someone who really understands is so helpful, and we can get over any hurdles together. Although we do try to have some normal conversations too. As Dixon looks forward to the new season, her first race as an FDJ Suez rider will be the Tour Down Under latest this month. And she also has her sights set on riding a Grand Tour in 2026. She's relishing the opportunity that lies ahead, however daunting a prospect being the world's top team may be. Having a contract with this team is a lot of responsibility, but I need to remember that they've given me a contract because they believe in my ability, she says. I'll keep reminding myself that I do deserve to be there, but when you sign a pro contract, you can't think, oh, that's me made it. There's really high expectations in this team, so everyone needs to commit 110% to keep up. That article was an exclusive by Susan Egglestaff.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and tell your friends about our service.